No worries.
Rookie error. Right. Here we go. Okay, thanks for joining. I see Joyce has joined us. Togo, Mavis, Tabo, how are we doing, guys? If you can just drop a message in the chat to let us know you are doing good. That would be awesome. All right. So I've just had confirmation that there's a couple of people that are going to be coming in as well. So feel free to say hi in the chat, please, guys, and we will get going. Awesome, awesome. All right, superb, superb. Oh, there we go. Hi, Mavis, how you doing? Okay, so just so we can just get started, a bit of for anyone who's not been with us before, just to let you know, we're the Zim Property Investors, and I know some of you guys won't be on the call, but will be joining us on the YouTube channel, and you'll be watching us from there. So if you do have any questions on the YouTube channel, obviously, you can't ask live, but let us know. Feel free to ask the question on the YouTube channel, and we will respond to you as soon as we can. Okay. All right, just to confirm, you can still hear me.
Yes, definitely can hear
All right,
you.
cool. Happy days. Happy days. Okay. So yeah, with the Zim Property Investors, guys, for anyone who might be interested in property in one way or the other, we're just a community of people that help each other in property. Some of us are already investing. Some people are just interested in looking for information to get started. So if you're one of those people, feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to have you in the community and happy to help each other in our property journey. So feel free to reach out. If you're watching on YouTube, just drop a message in the comments and we will get in touch with you. And if you're on the call, feel free just to message us and we'll be happy to help. Okay, so just to reiterate, we're going to be having a conversation with Tim, who has gladly accepted our request to come and share with us some information on how to invest in Europe and the Americas. So we're going to be talking to him today, asking some questions about how to get it done, what the advantages and all sorts are. So for anyone who might be interested in investing outside the UK or in Europe in particular, or and Americas, feel free to just jot down your questions. We're going to be asking him questions today, and he's going to share with us how to do it, the advantages of it. And for any questions you might have, please feel free to drop them in the comments and in the chat on the Zoom call, and we'll just follow up with that. So without wasting too much time, because we're supposed to start at 5:30, we're just gonna ask Tim if you could just come in and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks very much for the invite, Muzi, and thanks very much, Zim Property family, for having me on. Just to give you a bit of background about myself, originally from Zimbabwe, moved to the UK some many moons ago when I was a teen. Did school, university, etc. And then in 2011, I found myself in Switzerland, working for basically what's called a destination management company. And they basically do, so if you think about the resort hotels that you stay in, whether it's in Greece or Egypt or whatever it is, the companies that actually manage those on behalf of the flagship names, the Marriotts, the Hiltons, etc. And in being part of that, I got an opportunity to work with developers who are obviously building these from ground up. And at some point, this is going to 2017, me and a couple of other people left to start a company that focuses on real estate across Europe and then eventually the Americas as well. And we focus on an area called residency by investing. So some of you might know the term golden visa, some of you might not, but basically that's the area that we focus on. We obviously have as a secondary just a normal retail available as well. So this is just a synopsis of who I am and where we are now.
Okay. I mean, you've already pointed out some terms that we've never heard of. I can tell you that now. So we'll be interested in finding out a bit more about that. So talk to me about how you actually got into the property industry itself. So how you actually decided this is what it is that you want to do.
Well, basically, it was seeing the opportunity and seeing what was out there. Initially, a lot of the residency by investing programs that had started were more focused on government bonds, etc. But that changed, and there was a focus on real estate. And because I was in touch with a lot of developers, there were people who were coming to me saying, "Well, you potentially have clients. Have you thought about going into this industry?" And basically, that was the genesis of the story.
Okay. And is there any, I mean, qualifications required that you had to go through to get to that point?
At that time, no. At that time, it was a fledgling industry in terms of the residency by investing. So it was something that only came later on. They are now governing bodies that just like in the UK, you've got for estate agents, you've got Property Mark. For obviously landlords, you've got the Residency and Landlord Association. So now there's an industry body that covers anybody who's in the residency by investing arena.
Okay. All right. I think that makes sense. So in terms of the residency by investing itself, are you okay to just tell us a little bit more about that? Because that's not a common phrase for some of us.
Yeah, so it falls into two categories, and one is falling out of favor, so to speak. So there's what's called CBI or citizenship by investing, and that really, for the most part, is the Caribbean, and there's an island in the South Pacific called Vanuatu. That's the core. It's Caribbean islands such as St. Kitts, St. Lucia, Grenada, etc., that offer somebody who invests into their country. So this is investing into the government. In most instances, they'll inverted commas call this a donation. And for that donation, after passing obviously the usual KYC, know your customer, and anti-money laundering checks, you would get a passport. So that's citizenship by investing. But this is something that is falling out of favor. And the European Union, the US government are trying to shut these programs down. So the alternative is what they call the residency by investing. Now, this is real investment in mainly real estate. It can also be in businesses, and this is mainly focused on Europe. Not just Europe, Dubai also has, or the UAE also has programs. And the idea is that if you invest in a property worth a certain amount, then you will get residency within that European country. So the main programs are Portugal, Spain, Cyprus, Greece, Malta, and a few others. A few others have actually just sunsetted or shut down. As I was saying, the European Union doesn't look at these favorably. There was a program in Ireland, and actually there was a program in the UK that was shut down during COVID, actually, because of the same sort of concerns. So these are opportunities that exist now, but as we see the climate change, especially with what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, we see a lot of pressure from governments to shut these down. For example, the Portuguese program used to be open to all in terms of it was purchase a property anywhere in Portugal. They're in the process of reshaping that, and it will now be specific areas that are designated for that, with the idea that eventually they're going to sunset the Portugal program.
So in terms of, you've just mentioned citizenship by investing, which is kind of switching off and moving to residency by investing, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. And what would be the difference there, citizenship and residence? Is it a requirement for you to actually reside there?
There is, it depends on the program. Different programs have different rules, but with the residency by investing, you are not a citizen. You're just so in the UK context, it would be you have right to remain in the UK, but you don't hold a British passport. And obviously, there's conditions to that. You have to be in the country for a certain amount of time. You obviously can't take part in elections and things of that nature. So this is where it's going. A lot of the residency by investing, just like in the UK, have a path to citizenship, but you have to qualify. You'd have to do so. In Portugal, for example, you have a minimum requirement on language. You have a minimum requirement on knowing the history of the country, and you have to do a citizenship test to actually get your citizenship. So it's extending the time period. Whereas with the citizenship by investing, you pay your money, you go through your checks, and you get your passport. With residency, you have to go through the qualifying period. So, for example, for Portugal, you'd have to hold your residency for a minimum of 5 years before you can become a citizen.
Okay, that makes sense. Right, I get where you're coming from. And so, speaking for people who reside in the UK and are investing in the UK, who are interested in investing in other countries, like the European countries that you're talking about, and there's this path of residency by investing, what does that mean? How do we actually get ourselves involved, and what kind of investments are available?
Sorry, I didn't get that. I lost. I lost you for a moment. I didn't get that question.
No worries, no worries. Can you hear me at the moment?
Yes, I can.
All right. So I was just talking about the investment types. So what's actually available for someone who's currently investing in the UK and wants to invest in those countries?
Okay.
What's available?
So this also then breaks down into two different categories. So I'll talk of the main ones. There is the core residency by investing, golden visa, which has thresholds. So the threshold, for example, in Portugal is a property that's at least 280,000 euros in value. And this would have to be a cash purchase. So you can't use any financial instruments in terms of a mortgage within Portugal, etc. And that would be the same for Spain. It's 500,000 euros. For Greece, it's 250,000. For Cyprus, it's 300,000, just to give you an idea. But there's an alternative which actually doesn't require as much of a cash outlay and also allows for you to utilize the mortgage. So this one is what's called the digital nomad visas. Intents and purposes, the difference is the golden visas, or the residency by investing, give you a long-term visa. So the Portugal one, for example, is 3 years off the bat. All of the digital nomad visas are 1-year visas. So you'd have to keep renewing that visa every year, but it allows you the same flexibility. So we'll just use Portugal as an example. Once you've got your digital nomad visa, you have visa-free travel across the Schengen states. And for all of you who are unaware, the European Union is introducing a similar program to the ESTA program in the United States, where for you to travel, you'd have to do sort of a pre-clearance. So even if you're a British national, got a British passport, you will have to go through this. And for those of you who have Zimbabwean or South African passports, that additional check will just mean it takes longer. Whereas obviously once you've got your residency card, you can travel not just to Portugal, but to any Schengen states, so Germany, France, etc., without any further requirements, visa-free. So that's some of the advantages. Other advantages, obviously, things like banking. For you to open a bank account within any of these European countries, you need to have some level of residency. So you would then have that. And with that also comes things like for people who are parents, access to education. So whether that's tertiary education in terms of universities, but also higher education if required.
Yeah. So for someone who's more interested in things that require less income or less money to actually get involved, so the digital nomad part is what I'm more interested in. I want to ask more questions about that. So for at the moment, just want to say I've just seen a lot of more people actually joining in. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. Appreciate it. So Tim is talking to us about investing in other countries in Europe and the Americas. So please feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and we will ask your questions a bit later on. We're just going to go through a few questions now. And if you have anything that you want to find out from Tim, please do not hesitate. Feel free just to drop a message in the chat and we will ask for you. And for anyone who's joining us for the first time, we're the Zim Property Investors, a community of people that help each other to invest anywhere in the world. So feel free to join us if you may wish to be part of it. Thank you. So coming back to the digital nomad that you were talking about, mainly because it sounds like something that requires less financial input. We want to find out from that. I am speaking for someone who's probably got a couple of buy-to-lets in the UK and maybe not so sure about continuing to purchase properties here and looking to see if you can diversify a bit, not put too many eggs in one basket, so to speak. And I want to get involved in purchasing properties outside this country, even though I'm not entirely keen on being a resident or a citizen elsewhere. Is that a path where I can actually follow the digital nomad path that you're talking about?
Yes, definitely. So the digital nomad visa, as I'm saying, is a one-year visa. And with anything you do in terms of property purchase, you can access mortgage facilities, etc. So in terms of cash outlay, it is the lesser one in terms of what you need to have available in terms of capital. The main criteria is around your income. So there's income thresholds, and this differs per country. So I'll use Spain and Portugal as two examples. So in Portugal, for example, you need to have a minimum income for the main applicant of at least 3,000 euros a month, and then 750 per additional applicant. So if it's you and your spouse plus 2 kids, you just have to add that up, and you have to have that as income. Now, they have, for example, in Spain, this doesn't mean that it has to be income coming from you being an entrepreneur, although I think I'm speaking to a lot of entrepreneurs who are in the property business. But even if you are employed, as long as your employer is willing to write a letter stating that in your position, you can work from anywhere, and obviously you have the income that qualifies you, you can also get that visa. So it doesn't disqualify you if you're, in the normal sort of, P60 type of job. You can, as long as your employer can write that letter confirming that you can work from anywhere. But obviously it's mainly focused on people who are entrepreneurs, who have their own businesses. And as long as your business has that sort of revenue coming in, you can qualify. Obviously, the secondary is property, because the idea is that if you're coming to the country, whether it's to be there for 2-3 months or longer, you have to have somewhere to stay. And this is where the property investment comes in. So you investing and purchasing, obviously, most of you guys are aware of the whole, Airbnb type of properties. Those are the ones that a lot of our clients go for. They look at properties that are in areas that do well on the holiday lets, and basically go in, purchase this with a mortgage. So to give you an example of the sort of cash outlay, unfortunately, since Brexit, the UK no longer has as favorable conditions when it comes to mortgages. So for example, Spain, you need to have at least, so it's now a 60% LTV, so you need to have at least 40% for your deposit. Portugal, in some areas, and also depending on your credit score, because they do have access to everything in terms of the Experian credit scores that you'd have in the UK. If you have a very good credit score in Portugal, you can get a 70% LTV. But the typical is the same, sort of 60%. And for Spain, I've seen clients who've had to do 50% because they just didn't have the credit rating. Unfortunately, during the last financial crisis in 2008, there were a lot of Brits who went out and were speculating and buying a lot of properties in Spain. And when things got tough, they just walked away. So because of that, there's a higher hurdle rate for you coming from the UK. Yeah. And for anybody who's not in the UK, you're in Zimbabwe, you're in South Africa, you're somewhere else, the same rules apply, because now obviously the UK is out of the EU. So it's just having that. So we'll use Spain as the example. If you've got your 40%, you've got your proof of income, that's verifiable, you can get a mortgage. Obviously, coming from a country like Zimbabwe, in terms of if you're in Zimbabwe, they're always skeptical about bank verification and prefer for you to have assets somewhere else that can be verified independently before they issue a mortgage. But these are things that when we go through consultation, we'll be looking at the best way to position yourself in a way that would allow you to access the mortgage facilities.
I think you've already touched on what I was going to ask as well, in terms of for those that are hearing this for the first time, who had interest in actually investing somewhere in Europe, in other countries. It sounds like there's a lot of information, and it needs to be simplified for some of us. So do you actually have a facility for you to actually guide people through the investment process and what options are available for them?
That's correct. So our normal process is we would have an initial consultation where we'd be looking at your goals, because at times people will come saying, I want to buy in Spain because my friend bought in Spain. But when you dig a little bit deeper, you find out that actually they've got certain things that they want to achieve in life or things they want to do. And Spain might not be the best place for them to invest. It might be a Cyprus, it might be somewhere else. So initial consultation is to figure out what is the best plan and how to get them there. Then further on, we will then deep dive into actually looking at real estate, et cetera, and that obviously is a secondary. But initially, we're looking at you as a whole in terms of yourself, your family, and where you want to be, and would be advising on the best solution at that time.
I'm with you. And I think that puts a lot of minds at ease in the idea, because you've already highlighted a few options that are available, which is good because you have options, but then also the more the options, the more chances we'll have an element of paralysis of analysis, essentially. So if you're available to give guidance, that's great. But what I also want to ask is, you mentioned that with some countries, you're talking about a 40% deposit to be able to get a mortgage. And even though the option is available for you to get the mortgage on the digital nomad, at least, for example, what would you say, the big advantages? Because a lot of us will be thinking, there's certain places in Europe where the weather is amazing. Therefore, the concept of Airbnb, for example, would work out really well. And there's certain designs of properties and locations that would work really well for a holiday resort, so to speak. What would you say are the advantages for someone who's currently investing in the UK, for example, in investing outside?
Well, you touched on it earlier, Muzi. It's all your eggs in one basket. I think anybody who's looked at COVID to now and looked at the strength of the pound will know that the pound doesn't buy what it used to before COVID. So currency is one very, very big one. in terms of if you want to diversify your currency risk, because unfortunately, the outlook for the United Kingdom economy as a whole is not that great. So if you can earn in a currency that potentially has potential to be stronger than the pound, you then will be having a higher return when you factor in the currency factor. So that's number one. Number two is the economies are very different. So especially if you talk about Spain or Portugal, and I'll highlight Portugal because Portugal has had a lot of uplift in its real estate value, especially in the main cities. So somebody who bought in Porto, well, I'll talk on Porto because there's plenty of other cities that have the same sort of story. Somebody bought in Porto in 2015 has seen property values go up by at least 130% in certain areas.
Whoa.
So, yeah, and that is something that is it's fortunate for those investors, unfortunate for the people who live in those cities, because now a lot of local residents cannot afford to live in the areas that that we grew up in. But it's the reality, and the Portugal story continues to grow. There's a lot of demand from digital nomads, retirees from the US and Canada who are trying to leave their home countries and relocate to somewhere else that's friendlier and for them cheaper. So because of that, that's another one where if you're in the business of sort of short-term buy and hold and sell, like the flipping, there's potential there. If you're a long-term hold, most of the areas that we focus on are all year round rental areas in terms of Airbnb. So you have the opportunity that, unlike the UK, which is very much for a lot of areas, it's either you're focused on the business area in terms of business rentals, or if you're on the holiday side, you make most of your money in the summer and it goes dead in the winter. In a lot of the European destinations, it's pretty much all year round. So you have that as a diversification in terms of your income. The other part is obviously having the residency, having that digital nomad visa that allows you to travel across Europe without any issues. It's also, as I was saying, access to banking and credit facilities. So UK interest rates are not where European interest rates are. So if you've built your credit score in Spain or Portugal, you have the opportunity to borrow at lower rates than you would in the UK. And obviously, as long as you service those loans, you're sitting pretty. So there's a lot of opportunity that's there as long as you think about it in an entrepreneurial way.
Out of curiosity, would your credit rating in the UK play any part in being able to purchase anything specifically in another country, or would you have to start building first your credit before you start purchasing?
Your credit score follows you. So this is where I was talking about. I've had a client who had to pay 50%, even though, when you initially came through, we had a quote for a 40% LTV just because he had bad credit or not so great credit in the UK.
Right.
So they do have access to this. Obviously, Experian is a global company, and they have that interaction. So in terms of building your credit, once you're there, it is local to the country. So, you have an opportunity for those who might not have the greatest credit in the UK and are looking at someone where they could maybe start again. As long as you've got the funds to do the 50% or more for your deposit, you have an opportunity to start from zero and not make the mistakes that you made when you started in the UK.
Yeah, that's where I was actually going with. I mean, there's a negative connotation to the idea of having bad credit. It usually just means you've been bad at managing your money, but there's certain circumstances that make your situation bad on the credit rating. And I was just thinking, if you can actually start from scratch in a different country and you've got your cash and you don't want to have to wait a long period of time and follow certain processes to build your credit here, can you just skip over and start investing in a different country and build your credit there as well?
Yes, you definitely can.
And that's fantastic. I think that's a really good point that you just highlighted there, which I thought about just as you were answering. But the other thing you spoke about I mean, it touched a nerve when you're talking about the fact that Airbnb here is only good in summer. It's going to drop in winter. I know the feeling, brother. I know the feeling. But is there any other strategy? So obviously in the UK, as we usually mention, you can do service accommodation, which is Airbnb. You can do HMOs where you put different tenants in different rooms. You can work with other commercial businesses that you can actually put in as tenants. Dependent on what works in your particular location and the type of property, there's loads of options in the UK. Do you have something similar in the different countries that you invest in?
Yes. So with regards strategies, obviously the most profitable, lucrative is the service accommodation short-term rental. You can do the normal buy-to-let on long-term ASTs. Some countries are very, very, so for example, Portugal, I would never recommend anybody that do long-term sort of ASTs in Portugal because they're very tenant friendly. And what I mean by that is if you have issues with the tenant, I know in Lisbon, it can take 3 years to evict a tenant.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is something I tell people that if you're looking at long-term rentals, we'll look at countries that allow for that and are more flexible, and some are not. So you can, and there's even Spain is tenant friendly, but there's ways around doing your contracts. So for example, in Spain, you don't do 12-month contracts because once you do a 12-month contract, it's classed as a long-term AST, and then the tenant's rights kick in. Whereas if you do what they call a medium-term contract, then you have the right to come today and say, I want my keys. You're out by the end of the week, and they would have to comply. So what a lot of people do to circumvent that and kind of have the best of both worlds is they do 11-month contracts. And then renew every 11 months. So technically it's the same, but by law, because it isn't December to December, they're not covered by the law that covers long-term tenants. So there's ways around it depending on the country. And I think this is where our advice comes in to be able to allow you to do a strategy that works for you. On the corporate side, the bigger cities are very good for that. And it is something that's growing, especially for example, Lisbon that I touched on. There's so many conferences that are now being held out of Lisbon. You've got just coming up is the one of the biggest tech conferences in the world, the World Web Summit. There's not enough hotels to cater for all the people, and that's where the corporate lets come in, and there's conferences pretty much all year round because of the favorable weather. So that's something you can do. And there's companies that, especially from the conference side of things, that specialize in just taking properties from landlords and saying, okay, we'll sort of, I guess the equivalent of what you'd say is rent to rent. So they'll guarantee your return, and they'll just be focused on getting those corporate clients in.
That sounds like a good situation where the hotels can't handle the demand, which means we can actually sort of work with that as well. And if there are corporate companies as well that take properties on, similarly to the rent to rent, like you've mentioned, is something that could work. Would that not give you the same problem, or because it's a corporate let, there's more leeway to being able to evict them if you need to?
That's exactly right, because it's not an individual, it's a company. Because for all intents and purposes, these countries are lean more towards the socialist side of things. So a lot of their laws are about protecting the individual and not really corporations. So as long as you're a corporate entity, you don't have the same sort of rights and protections.
Okay, that makes sense. I think it's actually similar in the UK as well, to be fair. So it's something that I suppose is a bit of a relief for the landlord or the owner of the property, where if you're not happy with how your property is being managed or what's happening in the property, you can actually choose to just evict them in a swift manner without having to wait 3 years. That is crazy. So just on I mean, you've highlighted what options are available and the fact that the demand is there as well. And there's also options in terms of how you purchase the property. There's also options in once you've purchased the property, what you do with the property as well. Fantastic. So how complicated is the process? What is the process in purchasing for an investor who's looking to get one unit to start with?
So this all depends on your path, but it's a lot of people try and overcomplicate the process. I would say it's even more straightforward than the UK, because I personally own some units in Spain, and I've purchased via mortgage. The only difference is this, like for example, the Spanish or Portuguese markets are very, very buoyant and very, very active. As such, if you're going down the mortgage route, our suggestion is start off by getting your mortgage, not just mortgage in principle, but actually going through the mortgage process and having that there. Because I can tell you, for example, when we went to look at properties, there's the first property I went to see is the one I wanted, put in an offer. Obviously, I was waiting for my mortgage to be approved. By the time we'd gone to see the third property, a cash buyer had offered.
Right.
So that's how quick things move. So always start off with the mortgage, see how much you qualify for, and then with that, you come with cash ready to buy, and you can make an offer same day. Once you've done that, for Spain, the process is handled by a notary public. So they will do, there's obviously fees related to that. And what I suggest is always so look at the purchase price, the value of the property, and have about 10% ready. You probably won't use all 10%, but having 10% covers you for all the stamp duty, equivalent of stamp duty, notary fees, taxes, etc., that you need to pay to get through, and all the legal fees as well. So basically the process is, initially you make your offer. This goes through your lawyer to get the notary public to check, to make sure there's no contesting on the title deeds, etc. So they'll do all of those checks, and obviously they're government employees, so they're not for the seller or developer or against you or anything like that. They will just bring facts as they are.
Yeah.
Once that's done, notary public will confirm that the purchase can continue. By Spanish law, they give you a 3-week cooling off period to say, okay, you've got 3 weeks to reconsider whether you'll continue with the offer as the buyer. Once you get through that 3-week period, then it's basically sign on exchange, and you have the keys. So that's how simple it is. Portugal is very similar. The difference is they don't have that cooling off period. So in Portugal, especially if you're a cash buyer, you can go from today making an offer to, in maybe a month's time, the full process being done, and you having your keys, title deeds done, everything exchanged.
In a month?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. There's me thinking we're living in a first world.
Well, the thing is, Portugal, the legal side of things in terms of the government organizations are relatively slow. So that's where the holdup is with a lot of this, is that getting the guys who convert the title deeds over, etc., to act. I think it's also they're a victim of their own success, because they have so many property transactions going through and only so few staff that it just takes time.
Oh no, I was actually sort of criticizing the UK, because here you're talking at least 3 months for a property purchase to go through. So I was thinking we were in the first world, and yet other people are getting it done within a month.
Yes, no, I mean, there's other markets like Cyprus to actually get your physical title deed, because they Cyprus and Greece work very differently. But you can, in Cyprus, go today and within 2 weeks have your keys, everything done. The title deed will probably take a year to come, because the way they work is basically it's almost like ancient blockchain. If you understand blockchain technology, it's like everybody who ever owned the property is on that title deed, and all it does is add on to say, okay, Muzi used to own this, now Tim owns it. So because of, they have to go through checks on all the transactions to make sure that everything has been done correctly, and there was nobody who was robbed or cheated or whatever it is. Because as you can imagine, especially in Cyprus, where there's a lot of an aging population, there's the temptation of the younger generation selling their parents' home without the parents knowing. So they have to kind of go through that. But in terms of ownership, you'd already be owning the property and have the keys.
Within about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now you're showing off, Tim.
Well, that's the world we live in. It is what it is. I think with the UK, there's a lot of legacy kind of legal issues that cause this. And I've heard of it's a lot of the time, unfortunately, I hope there's no conveyancing lawyers on this, but a lot of the time that's where things get stuck.
Shots fired. But no, I get your point. I completely get your point. We're always baffled as to why the process takes so long, but it just is what it is. So we just have to take it. I'm hoping that with technology moving on, which it has moved on so much with so many other things, but for that, it's still taking a while. But hopefully things will change soon enough. And I want to get into, you've spoken about the options that are available in terms of purchasing the property. You spoke about the different residency or citizen by investing, and you also talked about the investment opportunities once you've got them, once you've got the properties. I want to go into the visa application process, because you're speaking about something called the golden visa, right? And whether that actually correlates with the investing type that you spoke about earlier on, I'm not sure. But we want to find out a bit more about what that golden visa is and what's the application process. And just before you tell us that, just want to clarify for anyone who's just recently joined, guys, I can see some questions coming in the chat as well. Thank you very much, guys. Please feel free to just drop your question in the chat. And a little bit later on, we'll start going through those questions. So whilst you're thinking about that question, drop it in there, guys, and then we'll go through them after that. So yeah, Tim, if you could just tell us about the application process, the visa application process, and also if you can touch on what a golden visa is.
Okay, so I'll start off with the golden visa. So the main difference between, for example, the digital nomad and the golden visas for any of these Spain, Portugal, etc., is the golden visa is a longer term visa. So for Portugal, for example, you have 3 years. For Spain, it's 5 years. So you've got a 3 or 5 year visa that you have. From what rights you have the same as a digital nomad. You have access to obviously traveling across Europe because you'll be in a Schengen state. You have that residency permit for the 5 years. The big difference and why some people prefer to go for a golden visa versus a digital nomad, for example, is if they know that their long-term goal is to actually reside in Spain, or as in permanently reside in Spain or permanently reside in Portugal, their applications are looked at more favorably than the digital nomad who's renewed their digital nomad visa for 3 years and then says, okay, now I want permanent residency. So the golden visa application is stronger. Obviously, the investments are higher because you have to cash purchase. You can't use mortgage or anything like that. So, for Spain, it's 500,000. For Portugal, 280K. So it's a higher investment. And because of that, you have some level of preferential treatment. Yeah. So that's the main difference. The application process is very similar. Obviously, for the golden visa, it's proof that you've purchased a property that qualifies and that you have no debt on it. Well, you can actually. So in Spain, for example, I've helped people who had the 500,000 to put down as a down payment. And then they were purchasing a property that was like 1.3 million. The rest of it, they put on a mortgage. They could still apply for the golden visa because they had spent the 500,000 in cash. So that is something that's possible. the obviously from a application step by step, it's if you're doing the golden visa, proof that you've purchased, they'll do AML KYC on you to make sure that you're in the clear. And unfortunately for us Zimbabweans, this is where it can be a challenge because we have a lot of the same sort of last names. So Moyo, Nube, etc. Mugabe, and those sort of names obviously get flagged, and then it's the burden of proof is on you, unfortunately. So it's working with us and lawyers to make sure we have enough evidence to prove that you are not linked to anybody who's on a Zidera list or whatever it is. And I mean, for Russians, and so, I mean, obviously I'm talking Zimbabwean because that's the community I'm talking to. Russians, it's the same. They're going through this now. And that has happened to other nationalities who unfortunately, find themselves on sanctions lists in the US, etc. What's clear that, then you have to have a certificate of good standing. So that is the equivalent of a CRB check in the UK. That if you're in the UK, that would be that. In South Africa, it would be the certificate of good standing, that you've got no criminal record, etc., etc. For some countries, they are medical checks as well. You have to prove that. So, for example, Greece, you have to prove that you don't have any infectious diseases, HIV, TB, etc. So you'd have to do a medical check. Those medical checks are always done by Greek certified doctors in your country of residence. So if you're in Zim, then you'd have to go to the Greek embassy and they would give you to the doctor who do those. In the UK, the same. But Greece and Cyprus are the only ones that really have those medical requirements. For Portugal, Spain, none. Once you've got your certificate of good standing, then you put in your application with application fees. And in general, so if we're talking Spain, in total, government fees, you're spending less than €1,000 for a family. In Portugal, it's even cheaper. It's like €600 for a family, and that's all you pay. For the golden visa, it normally for Spain, takes about a month for them to process and give you application. You'd also have to do biometrics, where obviously now you'd have the biometrics on your residency cards for you and your family. For Portugal, it's 6 weeks to 2 months, just because of the number of applications they're having to process. For Cyprus, you can actually go, like if you're in the UK, you could actually travel to Cyprus and get it done within a week. So that's sort of the time frame you'd need. The biggest hurdle we see is the KYC AML. This is where a lot of time is spent, especially if there's any flags that pop up around names and proof of funds, where you've got your funds from. So as long as that is all clear, the application process is relatively...
There's not much challenges there. And okay, so just as you were explaining there, I was just thinking, a lot of us here in the UK and pretty much all over the world, we like the concept of leverage. I've got X amount of money, that person's got X amount of money. Can we put it together to actually invest in something where we'll get good returns together? But with the golden visa, for example, you mentioned a country, I think it's Spain, where you need a minimum of 500 grand or something like that.
Yes, that's correct.
Is there an opportunity to actually joint venture on the 500 grand, or do I have to have that myself to even get to that point?
You can do that, and there's ways you can do that. Unfortunately, that only works if you're part of the same family.
Right.
So myself and yourself wouldn't be able to say, okay, I've got 250, you've got 250, let's put that together, and both of our families receive that. We'd have to be part of the same family to be able to take advantage of that.
Got ya. Okay. But at least the opportunity is available then to actually put that together.
Yes.
Ideally, if it's the whole family. Okay. So I can see more questions coming through. I'm just going to ask one more question to you, Tim, and then we'll go to the questions that people have just put in here. And just to let you know, guys, for anyone who's put a question in there, we will ask it as it is. And if we need any more clarity, we'll ask you to unmute and just explain to us if your question's been answered, or if you need to clarify it a little bit more, if Tim needs you to clarify it. So with the I mean, there's the visa application process that you've just gone through, which I think is pretty clear, understood, and also the purchasing process itself, of which the biggest hurdle, from my understanding, is ensuring that your money is clean, and also ensuring that you and your generation with your name are clean, the KYC, as you mentioned, right?
Yes.
So the process seems to make sense. What costs are actually involved in that? I think you mentioned that with one of the countries, I might need to have an extra 10%. This is 10% off the purchase price, right?
Correct.
But on average, what costs are involved in the whole process of me just shifting from where I am and looking to purchase in a different country?
I mean, it differs country by country, but the average, obviously, Spain is the more expensive to purchase in terms of what you then pay in government fees. In Portugal, you're looking at maybe about 6% of purchase price for all your fees, etc., to then have the title deed in your name. In Cyprus, it's about 4 to 7%, just depending on the type of property and also usage, because Cyprus has like, for example, if your goal is to Airbnb, it's seen as commercial, and
Yeah.
commercial actually you pay a bit more. Whereas obviously if you're then going to do a long-term rental or use it yourself. For example, in Cyprus, Pathos has a very big British expat population of retirees. So obviously most of them would have paid 3 to 5% in fees because they are living there. Whereas obviously, if you're using it for commercial, they expect that you will have a return, so they charge you more. So it differs country by country, but would say Spain is the more expensive, and that you'd have to calculate about 10% into that.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So just from what you've said now, in the UK, if a property is viewed as residential, it's valued on bricks and mortar. If it's viewed as commercial, it's got its own commercial valuation. And on average, the valuation of a commercial unit is much higher. Is there an opportunity then, if my intention is to run that property as an Airbnb and currently it's a residential, and the person selling it has decided to move to a different country and whatever, and I buy it on its residential purchase price and then decide to turn it into a commercial, can I then remortgage it later on a commercial value, or is that not how it works?
You would have to. So normally you have a lock-in period with your mortgages. So even if from day one you are purchasing it, I'll give the example of property I purchased in Spain. Mm-hmm. We were locked in for 3 years before we could remortgage and look at whether it's other mortgage products or convert it into another mortgage type.
Right.
And that's basically what that would entail. But in terms of valuations, you are right. In Spain, they do similar. In Portugal, regardless of whether it's being used for long-term residency or short-term, it's valued on bricks and mortar and comparable values.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, it's good to know that there's a few other options there in terms of increasing the value and getting higher returns. Brilliant. Okay, so I'm just going to go into the questions now. Thanks, guys, for dropping the questions in. So the first one I can see here is Harold. Hey, Harold. Is there anything similar to digital nomad visa in the US or UAE?
So the UAE, yes, has got many flavors of digital nomad and golden visa. They have their pros and cons. So, for example, if you set up a company, there's what they're called, I think they're called industry-free zones, where you can register a company and then you get residency by having just registered a company. Disadvantage with this is they actually do not, if you're now trying to operate in mainland Dubai, for example, you can't build a credit rating. You can't get credit. You would probably even have difficulty renting a property on a long-term basis because you're not really seen as a resident. Golden visa is very different. You are seen as a resident, but there's no path to citizenship. So you'll perpetually be a resident and you'll never be able to get that Emirati passport. But it is possible. With the US, they don't really have a digital nomad visa per se, but they have investor visa. So there's what's called the EB5, which is long-term residency by investing. And this is, this is quite the high ticket item. You'd be having to invest in real estate projects that have the EB5 certification, and the, investment start at $1 million US dollars to get into that. There is what's called an E2 visa, but this only applies to certain countries. So, most of the countries, Zimbabwe, South Africa, don't qualify for E2 visas. The UK does. There's some Caribbean countries that do, Turkey, etc. If you have a passport from like the UK, you can apply for an E2 visa. And with an E2 visa, you'd be investing in either a business or in real estate that's commercial, that's classed as commercial. So in most US terminology, this would be multifamily. So this is like small apartment blocks, small flats, etc. And as long as that investment in the small multifamily or the business is more than 250,000 US dollars, then you can apply for the E2 visa. And that would allow you to, the advantage of the E2 visa is that your spouse can work from day one. Whereas like with the EB5, you can reside in the US, but none of you can actually work. So you'd have to be of independent means or have businesses elsewhere that provide for you. Whereas with the E2, from day one, your spouse can work. So what happens a lot of the time is people who are professionals will gift their spouse. So let's just say you've got a stay-at-home wife, and you're a doctor in France or UK, and you want to relocate to the US without having to go through the standard visa applications, you'd gift your spouse the 250K. She starts the business. You go to the US and you can start working as a doctor once you've done the medical conversion. So that's sort of the paths that are available. There is talk about a proper digital nomad visa from the US, but we haven't had any confirmation on how that will look.
Makes sense. I've just asked you to unmute, Harold. Does that answer your question, or is there anything else that you might want to clarify on that question?
Thank you. My question has been answered with so much more. Thank you for that.
Fantastic. Thanks for the question, Harold, and thanks for joining us. Right. Our next question is from Mugo. So Mugo says, hi, Tim. Do you have an example of a case study? Actually, it's a good point here. Have you got an example of a case study that you can talk us through in terms of capital invested and returns on your investment in any country, essentially?
Okay. I can talk of Spain as an example, because I am an investor in Spain. So in terms of capital outlay for, if you're not looking at the golden visa properties and you're looking to buy in kind of high return areas, south of Spain, etc., on the Airbnb side of things, you'd be looking at having a minimum investable funds of at least around, I'll use euro, and then obviously you can convert that. You'd need about 50 to 60,000 euro to be on the safe side to invest and get a good quality apartment in a high demand area. And your ROI on that, in terms of once you've kind of deployed the capital, purchased the property, you'd be looking at, if you're running obviously Airbnb type of strategy, you'd be looking at 20 to 25%. So you can make a really, really good return. Obviously, it's about the area. Real estate is real estate wherever you are in the world. It's about location. So it's really finding locations that work in terms of the strategy that you're looking at. But it is very profitable, and this is why, especially if you look at south of Spain, everybody who's anybody has property in the south of Spain. All the, Simon Cowell's got a property in Marbella. You've got, what's his name, the Conor McGregor. You've got all these guys who've invested there, and you've got a lot of investors, not just obviously celebrities, but you've got a lot of property investors who've purchased out there because the returns make sense.
Right. Brilliant. I think the question has been answered. If Mugo is here and there's anything else you might want to share or add, feel free to let us know. And also confirm if your question has been answered, please.
Yeah, the question's been answered very well. Just a follow-up, Tim. Can you get me a property next to someone, Carl, please?
Sorry?
Can you get a property next to
Are you
someone
able to
else?
get me a property next to someone?
The property that he owns is in an area that next to him there's a conservation site, and on the other side is a beach club. So unfortunately, you know, he bought in such a secluded area that you definitely won't be able to get anything. But yeah, I mean, if you're a football fan, Messi is in an area called Finca Cortizen. And yeah, we've got some properties for sale within the Finca Cortizen gated community, so you can have Messi as a neighbor.
Yeah, I can get in for 50, 60K investment.
No, that definitely, just to give you an idea, apartments within Finca Cortizen start off at about 5 million euros.
Yeah, now cool, man. Now, thanks very much for sharing the information.
No problem. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, that's spare cash for Mugo, 5 million euros, easy. Thanks for the question, Mugo. Appreciate that, and thanks for the answer as well, Tim. So we're gonna move on to Farai. Farai says, "Hi Tim, what about the language barriers? Would I need a translator? I trust you're in the process for Spain, Portugal to set up the mortgage, lawyers, sellers, etc. Or is English accepted generally?"
So obviously we are in the process all the way through, and I think obviously people who are on the WhatsApp group see me post these sort of properties, etc., etc. We also do the management in terms of getting you know, your rentals from kind of the Airbnb side of things as well. So we're with you all the way through the journey. From a language perspective, all countries, in terms of whether that's Portugal, Greece, Cyprus, Spain, English is very much okay. And you know, we work with the legal team that on the ground, they speak, you know, English. Everything is done in English. The only thing, obviously, that is still done in local language is anything that's legal. So all your documentation to the notary. But what they do is they'll do Spanish version, English version, which is a translation, and that's the same in Portugal. So in Portugal, they actually do them on the same document. So one side will be in Portuguese, the other side will be in English. In Spain, it's different. They'll just have two different documents, but it's exactly the same. And for the major metropolitan areas, we are not, you know, the first, you know, if you go to the Algarve, you're more likely to hear English than you are Portuguese. If you go to Marbella, you've got Iceland, Marks and Spencer's, Tesco's, all the brands that you know are from the UK, and you know, majority of people are very comfortable with English. I spent quite a bit of time there, and I can tell you, my Spanish is not great, and I've never had a problem. And that's the same for Portugal. Areas that can be challenging is if you want to invest in somewhere like Greece and you're not investing in the metropolitan areas, or you're not investing in the islands, that's where you could have a challenge. Cyprus, as much as you know they speak Greek, everything is in English. So there's no language barriers per se, and this is why these areas attract so much of an international clientele, because obviously the business language is English.
Makes sense. Are you here, Farai, to clarify if the question's been answered or any other information you might want to ask?
Yeah, I think yeah, it was answered well. I was just thinking of those problem tenants where I'd need to get someone like with strong accent, or
Yeah.
but on the legal side, yeah, it's been answered. Thanks.
And with that regard, especially for Portugal, if you by some sort of chance you purchase and you do that, and you find yourself in a situation with a tenant that you know you can't kick out, there's government set up mediators who try and find a solution. So a lot of the time, it may mean that maybe you give out a concession, such as I'll help this person find another property and maybe pay their first month's rent, etc. But it's better for you to go down that path than spend 3 years trying to kick them out. So we've had clients of ours who've been in that situation, and we've stepped in with lawyers where lawyers have found a middle ground, and we've managed to get that done.
Okay. And in terms of your management fees, how much do you charge? Like if I was to go through you to buy and for you to manage it? Or is
That all
that
depends on the property and what you would be expecting, because we also can operate in a almost rent to rent sort of approach, just depending on the property, where obviously we just guarantee you a fixed return, and we figure out what to do in terms of making it profitable for us. Otherwise, if we're just managing it on a standard sort of arrangement, it would probably be around 15%, just depending on the property.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks for the questions, Farai. Appreciated. Love to see how Farai is already ready to kick out his tenants before he actually bought the property yet. But I think it's a good point there. You definitely want at least an understanding with whoever it is that you're dealing with. So great question there. Appreciated, Farai. I've also got a question from Haji. Does the E2 visa have a residency pathway? If so, how long? I think you're speaking about the E2 when you're talking about the
US
way of the US. Yeah. So is there that?
The E2 visa does have a path to permanent residency in terms of getting your green card, but it is quite a long path. It is a 10-year path that you would have to be on to be able to then get to that goal.
10 years. Okay. So I've just asked Hazri to unmute if you're available. Please feel free to clarify if there's anything else you want to know or if that question's been answered.
Hi, Mosi. Hi, Tim. Yeah,
Hi,
question. It was a very, very quick answer. Not very attractive, the 10 years. Just sounds like it's more of a barrier than a pathway, really. 10 years is a long time. But yeah, thanks for answering that.
Yes, I mean, the thing about any of the US programs, unfortunately, the US, because obviously it is for whether you agree or don't, is seen as an attractive location, and you have a lot of people who have the funds to sort of go down that path. They try and make it as difficult as possible, mainly so that they don't get flooded with, not going to be politically correct here, but Chinese investors, basically, because obviously they have the funds and could do this, in an instant. So they try and put in the barriers to not get flooded with that sort of money.
Sounds about right. It does sound like a barrier. Out of interest, if one was on such a visa or residency pathway, do they have to be in the US the whole 10 years? I'm asking as a Zimbabwean now, trying to find ways.
Yes. So you would have to have domicile. You don't have to be in the US, all year round, but you'd have to be a tax resident. So there's rules around how many days you have to be in the country to qualify as a tax resident, et cetera, et cetera. So as long as you qualify for being a tax resident, you don't have to be there, permanently 24/7. But I think anybody who's going down the US route really is interested in living in the United States rather than elsewhere. Otherwise, there's more attractive from a tax perspective locations than the US.
Absolutely. Thanks for that. And thank you for all the shares you put on the group. I'm glad I've finally seen your face. You keep us very busy with all the beautiful properties. So definitely we'll be getting in touch.
No problem. And, it'll be lovely to have you as an owner of one of those properties.
Brilliant.
Superb. And yes, actually, that's a good point that Hazri has just pointed out. There's some really beautiful properties that are constantly being shared in the community, in the WhatsApp group. And not many people had seen Tim's face because we just see the properties being posted in there, which are amazing, by the way. So yes, so this is what we wanted to talk about. And this is the inception, essentially, of why we actually had a conversation about Tim coming to share this information, because we see that being shared in the WhatsApp group constantly, and not many people understand how that works. And some people who we had spoken to had pointed out that it seems beyond reach, because those properties look amazing and it looks like something that you'd buy when you're like really, really, really made it. But I'm glad we've got Tim here to share with us that some of the investments that you have here and how much you use to invest in properties here in the UK can actually still be used to invest in some of the properties that seemingly look beyond reach. So hopefully the information that's been shared here has added quite a lot of value and opened eyes, so to speak, in what other options are available, especially for people who are here in the UK with a few buy-to-lets and you're thinking, it's not yielding as much as I used to, or it's not yielding as much as I was expecting. What other options do we have? What other things can we do with the funds that we have? And hopefully that has clarified that. So thanks for the questions, guys. And thanks again, Tim, for that information. I've got another question here from Togo, who says, hi, sorry if this has already been answered, but how easy is it to open a bank account in all the countries that you've spoken about so far?
At the moment, I unfortunately for UK residents, unless you have some sort of residency, which would obviously come through the digital nomad visa or the golden visa, it's not so easy. The only country that kind of has some level of flexibility, if you have the money, is Switzerland, where we also do that in terms of helping people set up bank accounts in Switzerland, etc. But the other way, if you are not interested in property purchase and you wanted to actually have a Spanish bank account or Portuguese bank account, the other way, which is still open for UK citizens, is to open a company. That is something that we are seeing a few clients do, who are in the property space and then looking to get into the property business in those countries, in terms of they're opening up basically, property management companies, rent-to-rent type of companies, and then looking at attracting landlords and managing the properties on their behalf. So we're seeing a few clients who've come through that route. Obviously, for you to really do that effectively, you have to have boots on the ground for quite a bit to get your processes and people in place. And then obviously once you've done that, you can.
I'm just gonna ask Togo to unmute, and hopefully that question has been answered for you. Are you with us, Togo? I'm not sure if Togo is here, but hopefully that question has been answered. And Emmanuel has just dropped a message here: Sabadell Bank in Malaga if you're an expat.
Yeah, so I actually bank with the Banco Sabadell as well, but it's not the only bank that's open to expat business. Banco Santander is also very, very open. All of my online banking is in English. I do everything here. I mean, I think I've been in branch twice in my life, and everything else I just manage online. So it's very, very flexible. They're very open, unlike the UK, which has taken a stance where if you are a British expat living in Spain, you might have your bank account closed. The Spanish, are quite flexible.
That's brilliant. I can see Togo is unmuted. Does that clarify your question?
Yes, it does. And I've just posted another question. What is, as investors, what's the taxation like in, again, the countries that you've mentioned? If we had to buy properties for example, for buy-to-let. Okay,
so it differs per country. The least favorable when it comes to tax, you would best go through a tax consultant to find all the corners you can save on, is Spain, where if you're just doing buy-to-let or you're doing Airbnb type of properties, your property taxes can go all the way up to like 20%. With Portugal, that's the most favorable because of the visas that they have, the digital nomad, the D7 and the golden visa. They have sort of flat rate taxes that are between 5 and 15% on profit. So it's the lowest. And obviously the 15% is for, people who own the mega million properties I post and are renting them out for 30 grand a week and whatever it is. But if you got a smaller property, you're probably going to be paying like 5%. So from a tax perspective, I'd say Portugal, Cyprus are the most favorable, least favorable, Greece and Spain. But the maximum, I think Greece is the least favorable, and the maximum is about 25%.
Cool, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks for the questions, Toro, and appreciate that. I think a lot of people may have been thinking that as well, in terms of once I've purchased a property as an ongoing thing, what does that look like in terms of tax, and how easy is it for me to open a bank account? So thanks for asking the questions, and also Tim for the answers that you've shared.
Just also as a point of clarification, this all depends on, and obviously I'm trying to cover solutions that cover from the guys who are buying the mega millions to a person who's buying, a 150K property. If you're purchasing and it's one of the larger sort of properties in terms of value, then you have the opportunity to look at obviously purchasing it via a limited company, and that limited company can be domiciled anywhere in Europe. And then obviously why you do that is you look at the most favorable tax country, and then obviously because it's within Europe, there's double taxation rules. So as long as you pay the tax in the more favorable country, then you wouldn't be liable for the Spanish or Greek tax. So this is one way that people get around it, is you'd register your company here in Switzerland, and have a very, very low tax that you'd be liable for if you own like a mega mansion.
I think that makes sense completely. And I think it's actually quite universal in terms of things like taxation. There's the whole, it depends on your business, it depends on the investments, it depends on what you're doing with the properties, and also, so thanks for clarifying that. And I think it would not be a smart thing to just generalize in terms of what your tax looks like. It's always going to be specific to your current circumstances. So it'll be worth speaking to people like Tim to understand exactly, if I'm looking to do this and spend this much amount of money in this country for this type of property to do this with it, what does that look like? So I hope that helps as well. And just to let you guys know, we do actually finish at 7 o'clock. So this was going to be 5:30 till 7 p.m. And a lot of the questions that have been asked here have also been answered. And I'm hoping that this has been very valuable to you guys. We've got about 7 minutes for anyone who might have a quick last minute question that they want answering. Please feel free to share. In the meantime, just to let you know, guys, we are the Zim Property Investors. We're a community of people that just help each other in terms of investing in property all over the world. We're predominantly in the UK, and majority of people in our community are Zimbabweans, but it's not exclusive to Zimbabweans. So if you're not Zimbabwean, don't think you're not invited. Please feel free to come and join. We're happy to help. We're happy to work with you. And it'll be great to have you guys. So we're on WhatsApp, and we're also on Facebook. For anyone who wants to join us in WhatsApp, I've just put a message in the chat. Feel free to drop us a message on that number. And for anyone who might want to be closer to Tim as well, he is in that community. We can have a conversation about that. And speaking of that, Tim, for anyone who may want to be in touch with you, what's the best way to contact you?
What I'll be doing is I'll be sharing with you, Muzi, a list of contacts. So my contact details and other colleagues. I've got colleagues who are local in Zim, in South Africa, etc. So I'll share those details with you, and you can share with the group. And I'm more than happy to jump on a call with anyone who's interested or has further questions.
Fabulous, fabulous. Guys, I can recommend, I've had a few conversations with Tim, and what you've just heard today is just a snippet of the knowledge that this guy's got. So I would recommend for anyone who's considering investing in property anywhere outside the UK, in the Europe, Americas, as you've heard, he's got the knowledge for it. There's no harm in you just sitting down for a conversation with him, make a phone call, get to understand what you can do, what your options are for your personal circumstances. And let's actually see what we can do with the resources we've currently got to get higher returns. And I think that will be a bright idea. So for anyone who might want to be in touch with Tim, feel free to reach out and we'll have a conversation. So just to read out some of the things that have been put in the comments. Thank you so much, Muzzy and Tim, for this. Have to drop off as always. Amazing. Appreciated, Marcy, who is not Freddie. That's an ongoing joke from the previous meeting. Togo says, thank you for the helpful presentation. Appreciate that. Right, there's a question from Jess, who's just managed to seek that one in very quickly. What are the requirements or process to buy properties in South Africa? Is that something that you've actually worked with? I know we're talking Europe and Americas here.
No, but as I was saying, I have a colleague who is in property who I work with more for him bringing clients from South Africa, and he is in property in South Africa. So when we share the contact details, his number will be there and you can get in touch with him and he can walk you through the process. But it's not something that I'm familiar with.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And the point on that as well, with the question that Jess has just asked, just to let anyone else know about investing in property anywhere else around the world, the whole idea why this community was built is so we can share ideas. There are people who are currently investing in all these countries that we're asking about, and people like Tim who are investing specifically in Europe and Americas, and it's good to speak to people like Tim. And there are also people who are investing in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in different countries. So for anyone who might want to ask specifically about a specific country or anything that you might want to know, might be worth joining the community, get to know people that are doing this stuff, and also communicating with the contacts that Tim is going to be sharing as well. And as mentioned, Tim is part of the community, so there's no harm in being part of it and ask the questions that you might want to know. So thanks for that question, Jess. There's more that have just popped in. So it's thanks, Muzzy and team, for very informative. Thank you, Mavis. Thank you, Muzzy and Tim, for the eye-opening session, which I completely agree with Tim. This has been super eye-opening. I think there's as mentioned earlier on, there's a misconception about investing in other countries, especially when we see the types of properties that you post. The misconception is far away into the future, when you've made millions and millions, then you can invest in stuff like that. But it's really eye-opening in terms of how accessible it is for people that are currently where they are with what they have. So it's been amazing. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. And just a quick one related to that. I think one of the things that we also have to look at is when you invest, obviously property prices in general will always go up regardless. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you have to think about, you obviously might have the dream property, which is the, by the beach next to Simon Cowell, but you can start off with a, 1-bedroom apartment that you put out on Airbnb, build equity, and from building equity, sell on, buy the next one in another upcoming area, which is now, the 2-bedroom villa, and build up. So I've seen some people who started off in the area that I invested in Spain, where they started off with a 1-bed, and 10 years later, they've got their dream villa. So I think it's also having that mindset that you'd start off where you are and build up to where you want to be.
That is brilliant. I've just asked Hazri to unmute, but I'm going to read the message that Hazri sent first before she says whatever she wants to say. For UK buy-to-let investors with the depressed market and landlords burdens from HMRC, come, let's get equity out of your portfolio. I'll help you raise the funds to invest with Tim. So Hazri is one of the mortgage advisors that we have in the group as well. Hazri, you've unmuted. Please feel free to share more about what you've just said.
Hi, Muzi. I'm back again, Tim. I'm a radical mortgage broker and advisor. I love people to own money and to have money and to realize their potential. So I'm just saying, with the current burdens that are being put on landlords and with the massive equity and portfolio we have, let's kick this thing out and go out there with Tim and do things out there of the UK. There's life outside the pound, guys. And the older we get, we need to diversify our portfolio. I'm not going to teach anyone to suck eggs, but if you don't have cash flowing right now, bring your portfolio to me and I'll get money out for you to go out and have fun with Tim and his team.
Thank you very much for that, Haji. And to give you a practical example, there's a gentleman that I'm working with at the moment who owns a care home. And basically, obviously, he owns the property and he's pulling money out to invest in Portugal. And in Portugal, he's investing in student accommodation. So he's buying a block of student accommodation in Lisbon. And the returns he's getting, he's saying, well, with the favorable tax that comes with the golden visa, he's winning on all sides.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm looking for people like that, Tim, and more people that are happy to take that foot outside the UK market. We've got this, guys. Let's go and invest out there and make money hand over fist.
Amazing, amazing. I just love the level of marketing in this community. Love it, love it. Thank you so much for that, Hazri. And I know there's a few people that would definitely want to get to know more about what you can do with their portfolios. So again, Hazri is part of the community. So for anyone who will be interested in pulling funds out, utilizing the equity that you've got to get better returns than what you're getting now in your current portfolio, Hazri is a great person to speak to who can help you with that. And also, obviously, now we've got another vehicle that most of us didn't actually know was available to us in terms of investing in property in Europe with Tim. Just love how the community is building and options are opening up and doors are opening up for better returns. So please, guys, feel free to reach out and let's utilize this amazing community to help each other within our property journeys. Tim, from the rest of the Zim family and anyone else who will be watching on our YouTube channels, thank you so much for the amazing information that you've shared, and may you be blessed. Thank you very much for accepting the request to come and share this information with us as well.
No, thank you very much for having me, Muzi, and the family for having me. As I said, once I share my details with Muzi and team and they share them out, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to have a chat and help people out. So, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Come to me with questions and I'll do my best to answer them.
Amazing. Right. Thank you very much, guys. I'm going to stop recording